Recording in progress.
Good to go.
Yep.
All right, I'll call to order the Town of Mount Desert Planning Board meeting for February 8th, 2023. Welcome aboard. We are still in hybrid territory here where we are obviously on Zoom as well as in person here in the meeting room down on C Street. If you guys are on Zoom, could you please just sign in to the chat just so we have a record of who attended, and let's see, start off with board members present tonight. We've got myself, Chair William Hanley. We've got Tracy Loftus Keller.
Hi there.
We've got Meredith Randolph online and Dave Ashmore online, and away we go. All right, first item on the agenda tonight, we've got approval of minutes from the 25th of January.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting on the 25th of January as presented.
Meredith Randolph, I second that.
All right, all those in favor, Tracy,
Tracy Keller, I.
Meredith,
Randolph, I.
Dave,
Dave Ashmore, aye.
myself, William Hanley, aye. All right, item 3 on the agenda tonight.
You gotta wait, not 6:05.
It's not 6:05 yet. Everybody survived -16 this weekend.
Minus 16, minus 40.
Well, I bet you were nice and snug in there.
Yeah, I went out and took photographs and stuff like that, but
Yeah. How about you, Dave?
Yeah, I'm in Brewer now, so I'm back.
He's back.
All right, welcome back.
Welcome back, Dave.
Thank you.
why'd you only get to Brewer?
All right, 3 more minutes of chit chat. What else?
Anything you guys want the Luso committee to be looking at over the next town meeting?
Are you responsible for checklists and,
Yes,
you know?
Yeah, those need to be done.
we'll get that one.
Those are
Yeah,
in
like the
dire
check,
need.
yeah, like the checklists aligned with the,
Okay,
that was one thing.
I couldn't try to streamline them so they're not so redundant.
you mean it's also good if the number corresponds to the actual.
That would be great too,
Yeah,
but
that-
also
that
there's a lot of
helps.
redundancy in
Mhm.
review.
And you still want to do like what do you call the easy one? There's a.
Short form,
You still
yeah.
want to work on something like that, right?
Yeah, we use that all the time,
Okay.
for sure.
Can do.
Mhm.
And then we do the subdivision ordinance. That's gotta be done,
Yep.
because we're not consistent with the state,
We have a
so.
pretty full, good draft of the subdivision ordinance.
Yeah.
Already.
Is that the one that you sent, that little
Yes.
loser
But
advisory
I
group,
need to,
and
like,
then,
work out some things like, yeah, because we used a model, so there's a few things that probably are a little more than what we're used to here.
Does our subdivision ordinance have to have such large provisions for the road? I mean, could we take it to like 5 houses or something that you don't have to have a state highway to
Uh,
the houses?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that's something we should talk about as a community. There's a couple of different ways to look at it. Sometimes like the road standards aren't always in a subdivision ordinance. And I think that was the case at one point, and then for one reason or another before.
You mean in line your zoning ordinance,
Yeah.
it's typically not, it wasn't there before.
Before we got started, I think.
Yeah, it was in there and then it was taken out. Okay, let's go to
Yeah,
our
but
public hearing.
to your point, Meredith, I think that's good.
Actually, there were major subdivision and minor
Yep,
subdivision.
we had in one draft, there's something called the major subdivision and a minor subdivision. We could just talk about like, some communities, a major subdivision is anything more than 5 lots and. Minors are less than 5, and that just gives the board the ability to say, yeah, this one's got some of the same things that need to review, but not all the things. So we can definitely talk about that.
Okay, public hearing. Let's go.
All right, item 3. We got a public hearing tonight at 6:05 PM. We have land use zoning ordinance and land use map amendments for the 2023 annual town meeting on May 2nd, 2023, and we've got Noel Musson here tonight. And I'm gonna turn it over to you, Noel.
All right.
Hang on a minute. These were published. For
Yes,
public hearing notification. They were published in the January 19th, Ellsworth American and Mount Desert Islander, and January 26th in the Islander and the Ellsworth American.
all right.
Good. I'm gonna stand. The view. I'm just gonna go through in my order, if that's all right. It's probably easier.
That's fine.
So these are very similar in wording to the ones that we just went over at a high level 2 weeks ago, I believe. Since then, we have met with the town's attorney just to kind of polish up language as necessary, but substantially the same as what you've seen before. So the first one, if you recall, was a proposed warrant article to change the timing for establishing a use after conditional use approval. Currently, it's 12 months. This proposal changes it to 24 months. Any questions?
No.
Right, and these do need to be voted on by the board,
If there's no.
right?
Do we do these individually or all collectively?
Individually.
So I can make a motion that I think that is appropriate to make that proposal, that change.
And you're recommending it to.
Recommend for. I recommend it for approval.
The Board of Selectmen, or no, to the warrant.
warrant committee.
warrant
To the
committee.
warrant committee.
Yeah.
Meredith Randolph, I second that.
All right, all those in favor, Tracy,
Tracy Keller, I.
Meredith,
Randolph, I.
Dave,
Dave Ashmore, aye.
myself, William Hanley, aye. All right, what's next?
It did it at the select board meeting on Monday too. I don't know what it is.
Sounds like it's a water and pipes or something.
All right, the next one is a proposed warrant article that would amend the land use ordinance to delete the standard for, or the specific performance standard for air landing sites. Air landing sites are not even in the allowed uses table. What this change would do is just basically delete that as a standard, and rather than renumber the whole section, we just say reserve for that one in case we need to add something back in.
And we'll get it off the checklist.
And we'll get it on the checklist. Yep. Any comments or questions?
That sounds appropriate. I make a motion to approve that and recommend it to the warrant committee.
Dave Ashmore, second.
All right, I think Dave
Me
got
too.
it. All right, all those in favor, Tracy,
Tracy Keller, I.
Dave,
Dave Ashmore, aye.
Meredith,
Randolph, I.
myself, William Hanley, aye.
Okay, the next one is a clarification of footnote 3.5 in the land use ordinance, which basically clarifies that the footnote P, which says village commercial districts have for lots in the village commercial district that have minimum lot area and public sewer, or have public sewer, the minimum lot area can be reduced. 1,000 square feet. This change clarifies that that is only applicable in the village of Northeast Harbor. Which, if you'll recall, when that was adopted several years ago, was actually the intent.
That's the only place that is supposed to have that.
Correct.
provision.
Yep.
Okay,
We do have, you know, village commercial districts like in Seal Harbor. And Somersville area. But this wasn't intended for those towns. Only in the village of Northeast Harbor.
You can have 1,000 square foot lot in the village commercial district.
No,
No,
No, you have
still,
to,
you have to have 5,000 as your minimum lot area.
yeah,
But in order to have dwelling units on your lot, you can allocate or you can calculate 1,000 square feet per dwelling unit. So if you have a 5,000 square foot lot, you can have up to 5 dwellings in Northeast Harbor.
which is currently in the ordinance.
got it.
I will say, you know, just to put the plug in for comprehensive plans, but. I think it's important to make this change because the discussion. Of this particular provision really did focus on Northeast Harbor and
Mhm.
that the implications for other places in town really weren't discussed. And that is a great thought for the comprehensive plan when we get, you know, as we're getting ready to work on that. What should Somersville look like? And do we want to think about future land use in Somersville and things like that? But the point of this change is really just to be specific. Back to the intent. Questions, comments?
Was when the comp plan was written, was that intended for more development in Northeast
Yeah.
residential? Yeah.
Yep.
I make a motion to recommend the change to the warrant committee.
Tracy Keller, I'll second that.
All right, all those in favor, Meredith,
Randolph, I.
Tracy,
Tracy Keller, I.
Dave,
Dave Ashmore, aye.
myself, William Hanley, I.
Okay. The next one is a proposed warrant article to make a housekeeping correction in the land use ordinance. To correct the date for when a lot was created for the purposes of provisions 11 2, which deals with access. So the original date that should have been applicable actually referred to May 5th, should have been a May 5th town meeting. And the reference point was a June 6th, which I think was a carryover from the town meeting. I think that was the year that the town meeting had to be carried over for the
Yeah, the audit wasn't in the warrant at that
Yeah.
time.
So this is really a housekeeping measure just to make the applicability date back to labor should.
Tracy Keller, I'll make a motion to recommend that to the warrant committee.
Meredith Randolph, I'll second that.
All right, all those in favor, Tracy,
Tracy Keller, I.
Meredith,
Randolph, I.
Dave,
Dave Ashmore, aye.
myself, William Hanley, I.
All right. The next one is a proposed warrant article that amends the land use ordinance, really to provide some clarity that the dimensional standards for both 1 family and 2 family units, how they apply. And so really it's that single family units and 2 family units are counted as structures. So a 2 family is a single structure and the dimensional standards apply. You add a second duplex, that's when the dimensional standards ×2 kick in, that whole provision. Whereas it could be interpreted, and it's never been interpreted this way, but we're just clarifying that a duplex doesn't need the dimensional standards for each unit in a duplex. Hopefully I'm explaining that simply enough, but it's a little twisted, but yeah, duplexes count as a single structure for density purposes, for dimensional standard purposes. Questions, comments?
Dave, you look like you're thinking.
No comment.
Thinking about making a motion?
Yeah.
There. Go for it.
Okay, I'll make a motion to recommend that to the warrant committee.
Dave Ashmore, second.
All those in favor, Tracy,
Tracy Keller, I.
Dave,
Dave Ashmore, aye.
Meredith,
Randolph, I.
myself, William Manley, aye.
Okay, the next one is a proposed warrant article that clarifies how road setbacks are measured for public and private roads. So it really simplifies footnote C in section 3.5, and that, as you know, road setbacks are different depending on whether it's a public road or a private road, but the measurement of where that setback is measured from is the same. So if it's a traveled way, where one exists, or the right edge of the right of way, if there's no travel way. So just clarifies that.
I make a motion to recommend the change to the warrant committee.
Dave Ashmore, second.
All right, all those in favor, Meredith,
Randolph, I.
Dave,
Dave Ashmore, aye.
Tracy,
Tracy Keller, I.
and myself, William Hanley, aye.
Great. The next one is one that, if you recall, when we had this conversation before, in the ordinance today, there's no ability to, if you buy a residential lot and you want to put up a garage or shed, without having to have that associated with a dwelling unit, there's no ability, it's not allowed in the ordinance today. So this next change would amend the ordinance to create something called a residential storage building / shed, which is a little different than the language that we talked about last time. We spoke with the town's attorney and thought maybe putting the stable and barn in there was a little bit of a reach, given the things that stables and barns could entail, but that like a garage or shed was much more in line with what we were talking about. So we basically created the term residential storage building or shed, and then we added a definition for that. And that's what the provision would do. So essentially, if this passes, you'd be allowed to build a garage or shed on your property without having that be an accessory structure to your house. I also like to use the example, like if I were fortunate enough to buy a piece of property on Long Pond, but because I bought that property on Long Pond, I couldn't afford to build anything. Today, I wouldn't be able to even put a shed there to store my kayak or my floaties for my kids. I would have to build a house first. This provision allows you to do stuff like that.
You wouldn't be able to have an RV either. Do like an independent campsite, if that's not a principal use.
Right. So it's kind of taking the concept of what, we termed accessory structures to some degree, and making it so that you don't have to be an accessory to something more expensive, I guess.
Yeah, your language in the warrant article still says barn stable.
Yeah, I'll have to choose the question. But
Yeah.
yeah. Thoughts or comments?
So why did you take the barn out?
So when you look at the definition of what a barn is or what a stable is, that has land use implications that aren't the same as like a garage or a storage shed. There are provisions in the ordinance that allow you to go to the board or get a permit for a barn or something like that.
Well, it's associated with like horses, somebody just being able to have if they put a barn or a stable, then does that allow them to start renting horses? And so we took that out because animal husbandry is covered in the ordinance already as a use.
Yeah, I think the town's attorney thought it was a little more broad than what we
Yeah.
needed, and it was gonna have a lot more implications. So it's not architectural style, it's basically use. So you could have a garage that looks like a barn, but it's not a barn.
Okay,
Is that a motion, Dave?
So moved.
Tracy Keller, I'll second that.
All right, all those in favor, Dave,
Dave Ashmore, aye.
Tracy,
Tracy Keller, I.
Meredith,
Randolph, I.
myself, William Manley, I.
Okay, let's see, the next one is proposed warrant article. It's really another housekeeping measure to be consistent with state shoreline zoning by increasing the footprint limitation for principal and accessory structures in the shoreline zone from 15% to 20%. Questions?
And that's the general shoreline zone, the 0 to 250.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Section 6C. Yep.
What instigated the change?
What was that?
What instigated the change?
It is basically, I think this was brought to our attention about almost a couple of years ago, and we just didn't get to it last year. I don't remember the circumstances, but it's really continued to be consistent with state shoreline zoning. We haven't really done a full on zoning update for a while either, but this is just a small update.
Tracy Keller, I'll make a motion to recommend that to the warrant committee.
Meredith Randolph, I'll second that.
All right, all those in favor, Tracy,
Tracy Keller, I.
Meredith,
Randolph, I.
Dave,
Dave Ashmore, aye.
myself, William Hanley, I.
Okay, the next one is a proposed amendment to the land use ordinance that deals with a couple of different definitions as they relate to moorings. So the first change would be to exclude moorings that are regulated by the harbor master under the definition of expansion of use. So in other words, a addition of moorings doesn't constitute an expansion of use if this ordinance, if this change passes. And then under the definition of marina, that the placement of moorings that are exclusively regulated by the harbor master, consistent with the harbor ordinance and state statutes. Those things are, just to clarify that those are regulated by the harbor master and other state laws, not a land use review, essentially. Definitely made that explanation way more complicated than it needs to be, so I apologize for that.
I make the motion to recommend that change to the warrant committee.
Tracy Keller, I'll second it.
All right, all those in favor, Meredith,
Randolph, I.
Tracy,
Tracy Keller, I.
Dave,
Dave Ashmore, aye.
myself, William Hanley, I.
Okay, the last one for the planning board is a proposed zone change. This change would potentially amend two different tax maps. Or two different lots in tax map 3 from shoreline residential 2 zoning district to a residential 2 zoning district. Both of these lots are outside of the 250 shoreline zone. The map is attached. This is not the official map. This is a illustrated map for generation purposes. And this was a request by both homeowners, property.
I'll make a motion to recommend the change to the warrant committee.
Dave Ashmore, second.
All right, all those in favor, Meredith,
Randolph, I.
Dave,
Dave Ashmore, aye.
Tracy,
Tracy Keller, I.
myself, William Hanley, I.
Okay, lastly, while this is not a warrant article that you need to vote on, but the town, the Board of Selectmen has asked the Land Use Ordinance Committee to work on some potential language around short-term rentals. So we did come up with what we're trying to come up with is a balanced licensing ordinance. So short-term rental licensing ordinance. We've had several meetings at the Land Use Committee for this, and we're having a public hearing on this particular draft on the 21st. But if anybody on the board or in the audience or online has any thoughts or questions, it's a great opportunity to kind of weigh in on it, because we are trying to make it more or as well-rounded as we can, as balanced as we can.
It is on the town website.
Yeah.
Over there.
And I would say, like, just to summarize my understanding of the approach is, you know, the town is recognizing that short-term rentals can play a role in the affordability and availability of homes in this community. What the Land Use Committee is really interested in is coming up with a process by which we can more accurately understand how many short-term rentals there are in this town and where they are in this town, so that we can determine whether or not that, as a community, you can start to determine whether or not that use is starting to become out of balance with other uses. It's definitely not taking a position. In fact, I think if you read the purpose, you know, recognizing that short-term rentals have historically been a use in this community and other communities on the island, but so there's a good recognition of that. But this is the best way we can think of to present to the town something that they can start to understand the scope and scale of the problem, if there is one.
Noel, is there anything in there to separate out houses that maybe only get rented out for like 2 weeks a year? Like, there are a lot of summer families that just need a little extra cash to help pay with the taxes, but it's not like the property is primarily a rental.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, Meredith. I don't believe that would qualify if it's only like a one-off couple weeks, but I could be wrong. I'll have to look into that. That's a great question.
I think
I will
you're
say
gonna
what-
have, I think you're gonna have to create a dividing line of like how many weeks does it need to be rented when it falls into that category?
The standard definition deals with how many, well, we have it as consecutive nights. So it's less than, like, if I rented my house out for the month, for over a month. So we did just you know, June, July, and August, we rented that. That doesn't qualify as a short-term rental, I'm pretty sure. But I'd have to look at, say we just did it for 2 weeks out of the year, do we need to register? I don't think that's the intent. We also added a provision in there that if you are an owner occupied rental, like I own a house, I'm renting out a room, that doesn't need to be registered either.
Great.
And there's a few, very few, well, some people will probably say more than there should be, but there's a few, we'll call them life safety provisions, but basic stuff, like you gotta have a smoke detector and carbon dioxide and a fire extinguisher kind of stuff. So we've had a lot of good input, I think, both for and against, and hopefully, I think the idea is really just to present something that's thoughtful so that the town can consider it in May.
So going along with what Meredith said, IRS does not even require that you report income for 2 weeks or less. So a lot of people do it and they don't even have to report it.
Do you want to read what you define short-term rentals? It's 28 days.
Yeah, if any person who rents, licenses, occupies, or has the right to occupy a dwelling, that's a short-term rental guest. So short-term rentals are the use, control, management, or operation of a legally existing dwelling unit for fewer than 28 consecutive nights. For compensation directly or indirectly, excluding motels. So that's why I say it's a good question, Meredith. We'll have to look into it, I think.
And then-
Take time to make an
Yeah, because
adjustment.
I think you're gonna find that a lot of the summer homes rent out a month. And then they use their house for the other times, but the July and August seem to me, that's when I did rentals years and years ago. There were houses that were available for July only or for August only. And the families really just were looking for that chunk of change. The
Yeah.
28 days is, if we made it like 32 days, I think you'd hit that cutoff, but at 28, you're kind of cutting people out of doing a month rental.
I think actually if you did a month, like say 30 days, 29 days, then you wouldn't need to get a license. That's the way I read it.
But we came up with that number from the state of Maine web, because I Googled what is a short-term rental in the state of Maine, and that's where we came up with that number.
Yeah, and actually this the pretty standard definition of short-term rentals is 30 days. But we did a little more digging and turned it in, or the committee did a little more digging and turned it into 28 nights. But I do want to look at what if you just do a one-off? I don't think that triggers a short-term rental.
Well, you say a short-term rental does not include legally existing dwelling units that are rented no more than twice
I mean,
per calendar year and for less than a total of 14 days in a calendar year.
that covers it.
So all those Airbnbs that are renting for like a week, 5 days, don't have to register.
Yes, they do.
They do.
Yep.
Unless they only read twice in the entire calendar year.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. It's not only duration, it's frequency.
Yeah. So not a planning board ordinance, but definitely worth, good comments. I think it's a really interesting conversation.
Generally, it's not, this isn't a regulatory exercise. It's really a mapping exercise to.
Yeah, so that it starts with, hey, we think we have a problem, but we don't know that, like, there's a question, the question is, do we have a problem?
Mhm.
Right now, with short-term rentals. We have a problem as a community with affordability and availability. Sometimes short-term rentals can contribute to that. So the question was, do we have a problem? The only way to figure that out accurately is to have people get a license, a register, so we can know where they are, who they are, and then you start to think about, okay, there's no issues with that, we don't really need to worry about X, Y, and Z, or boy, there's a huge concentration of these uses here. What are the implications of that? We can start to have more informed discussions to try to answer the question, do we have a problem? What is the problem? We don't know. It's hard to just say we have a problem and not have the data to back it up. So that's the whole point of this. And it sets a framework for being able to make good decisions in the future as well.
Now, we were tasked to try to come up with an ordinance, but we don't know what's going on yet. So that's why we've got the licensing ordinance first, so that we can try to, like you just said, pinpoint, and then if we determine it is an issue or a problem, then Noel can put an ordinance together that regulates short-term rentals.
I think we can have informed discussions about it as a community based on the data, and it's not as easy just to go and say, hey, well, you can get that information right on Airbnb, but you can get some data. It's just not as accurate as if you just get people to register. So I think, again, I keep using the term balanced approach. So it's sort of a balanced approach to try to figure out the answer to some questions without having a huge, although some people would argue we still have a huge name about it, without having a really big ask.
So Noel, has Andy looked at the section on
Yep.
violations
Tomorrow.
and penalties?
Yeah, we're meeting tomorrow morning, actually.
You're meeting with Andy to discuss that?
Absolutely, yes, tomorrow morning. Yep.
So I just want to remind you that I think that's very, very severe. And I think
Yep.
the violations and penalties are covered under suspension and revocation.
Yep.
Um,
You're right.
I don't think there's any need of that clause at all. If you're gonna keep it, I think it should be softened. And it should be administered by the selectmen.
Yep. Thanks for the reminder. Anything else? Any other thoughts or questions?
Anything else, guys?
Are we contemplating the additional regulations? Or is that,
No. You mean, what do you mean the additional regulations?
under 9 on the list?
Oh, my list? Which is,
What are you talking
no,
about?
no,
Dave?
we're gonna take that out, Dave, or I actually have to talk to Andy about that.
What is it?
It's the last section in the short-term rental ordinance, says the Board of Selectmen may adopt regulations implementing the provisions of this chapter. Yeah. I think that may end up coming out too, Dave.
Pardon me?
I think that may end up coming out too, but I just need to go over all that with Andy.
Okay, good, thanks.
Yep.
Are we all set? Any further comments, discussion? Thank you, Noel.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate the time. We'll work on application plans next.
Right,
Yeah, actually, we're all signed.
okay, moving on, item 4, other. We don't have any other items identified under other. That takes us to adjournment.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Dave Ashmore, second.
All right, all those in favor, Meredith,
I.
Dave,
Dave Ashmore, aye.
Tracy,
Tracy Keller, I.
myself, William Hanley, aye. This is our fastest motion tonight. Thank you.